Lawyers of Reddit, what's the most ridiculous argument you've heard in court? Waiting for my case to be called, I heard a wild argument. It was a domestic violence case and the petitioner, person seeking protection, was accusing respondent, ex-boyfriend of abuse. Specifically, he head-butted her. Respondent argued back by saying, seriously, honestly judge, I couldn't have because look at my head. It's huge. A head this big would leave a mark. Honestly judge, look at my head. To which the judge responded, son, I have a big head. Look at my head. This went on for a minute. Now the story doesn't stop here. It just gets better. The respondent then argues that petitioner is keeping him from seeing their daughter, and that she went as far as putting her uncle as the baby's father on the birth certificate. At this point I'll look around with shock. The clerk's mind is slowly grasping what he said, and the judge nods his head with a typical Tuesday smirk. I am a lawyer. Colleague argued that it wasn't animal cruelty to shoot a dog because the dog didn't suffer. This wasn't like a euthanasia situation, rather a robbery gone bad. The judge entertained it for a second and then came to her senses. There is famous case before the Danish High Court where a woman was arped by 8 bikers on a beach. The defense argued that she had wanted it because she willingly put herself into a situation where she was alone with 8 men. The female prosecutor then casually looked around, counted there was 11 men and she was the only female and asked, so you are saying I am asking for it now? The story says that was the only time all the judges have burst into laughter in any case. Safe to say the defense argument didn't go over very well with the judges. I'm a lawyer. The most ridiculous argument I've seen was one I actually made. One of my clients got busted cooking M. This was a very clear-cut case. They actually caught him in the middle of a cook. No way he was getting out of this one. Even worse, he was cooking at home and children were there. Yep, they loaded him up with felonies. There was no bail and he was being held in the county jail. My client knew he was fricked. He had been planning to get married a few weeks after he got busted. My client asks me if he can get released for 24 hours so he can still get married. I tell him that I'll ask, but that there's no way in fricking heck they'll let him out. First, I ask the DA if they will allow it. Nope, they laugh. So I file a motion with the court. Now, I knew the judge was a crusty old conservative family values kind of guy, who also has a raging erection for drug crime. There was no law involved, but I put together an argument about the sanctity of marriage and how the state should encourage marriage at all times, and that sort of thing. We have a hearing and I make the argument. The DA is totally opposed and calls it ridiculous, and the judge grants it. The judge actually decided to allow my client out for 24 hours to get married. He had to surrender at the county jail at 8 AM the next day and some other conditions, but still, he was allowed out. Everyone is stunned. Nobody can believe it. The day of the wedding comes. My client gets out, gets married, then goes back to the jail. Everything went exactly like how it was supposed to, which is also pretty shocking. That's actually kind of nice, if you ignore the part about this being a person who uses their family's home as a RIM lab. Public defender, checking in. Apart from the usual sociopaths who argue that there's nothing wrong with cheating people, stealing, and screwing people over, and apart from the constitutionalists who want me to argue that because they put their hands over their eyes the government can't see them anymore, there are some good stories. I had a client accused of hit and run damage to unattended property, to wit, a stop sign post. My client had parked his car in front of a gas pump and walked into a Quickie Mart. The car rolled away from the pump without him, rolled over the curb, and then over a stop sign and into a ditch. My client ran out of the store, got in car, and promptly sped off. His driver's license was also suspended at the moment. This was all captured on video by a conveniently timed passing city bus. My guy wants me to argue that it wasn't hit and run because he wasn't driving the car when the thing got hit. He's got exactly half a point. I had to tell him that his argument solved, at most, half of the problem because it sure as heck was him driving for the run part of the hit and run. He took the plea deal. Not a lawyer but my uncle is. He had to defend a man accused of bestiality with a horse. Defense was that his dong was too small to actually achieve climax in the horse's anus. Ergo he didn't actually have intercourse with it. But I mean he was giving it enemas with washing up liquid and even had a little stool to stand on when he was ready to go at it, so the defense didn't really work in his favor. Neither did the CCTV footage. Whenever I try to frick a horse, I make sure there are no cameras around. I mean, this is pretty basic stuff here. Actual lawyer here, but this one comes from my time as a law student. As a 1L, they send you to go watch a day in a courtroom to see what it's really like. One of the things nobody tells you is how much talking goes on in courtrooms when motion hearings are going on rather than an outright trial. There's a noted buzz throughout the room, usually of attorneys speaking to their clients about how the process was going to go. I happened upon a domestic violence hearing. When the poor victim took the stand, that buzzing stopped. You could hear a pin drop as she was sworn in and began testifying. Her attorney set the stage for the morning, and then asked her, "And then what happened?" The victim looked right at the judge and said, "I made him hit me, Your Honor." There was an audible gasp. The judge, probably overstepping his bounds a little here, intervened in the questioning to say to her, "Mom, forgive me, but I feel like this is an important point you need to know. Dear, you can't make anyone hit you, and you didn't make him hit you." The woman, instead of consoled, looked completely baffled. She waited a few beats, and then finally said to the judge, "I'm pretty sure I did. I mean, I jumped on his back and hit him over the head with a frying pan. After all, Your Honor." The entire courtroom burst into laughter, and the judge conceded that she had, in fact, made him hit her. Not an attorney, but my grandfather told me a story about how he was into court in the early 1950s to defend himself for a traffic violation. The police officer used evidence against him that he had been rampaging all around town for the past few months, but the cop was such a nice guy he had been letting him go. My grandfather's response was, "Judge, I'm not sure about how much rampaging I've been doing, but it wasn't in your city. I've been helping to rebuild Germany for the past 18 months. I just got back in town on Friday." My parents are both lawyers. Was in court with my dad when I was younger. Dad is throwing out objection after objection at the opposing counsel during cross-examination. Judge is sustaining all of them. Several hours into this, the judge is getting restless and asks the opposing counsel to hurry it up. Opposing counsel responds, "Well, if Mr. Surname would stop objecting, perhaps I could get through my examination." Judge did not like this. She lays into the guy, "If you would stop asking objectable questions, Mr. Surname wouldn't have to object. Hurry this, I am not going to sit here all day." Was pretty cool to watch as a kid. Dude got roasted. Dad won that trial. I'm a lawyer, but this happened a little prior to me starting my current job, so this is second hand. A friend of mine is an author and last year prosecuted several chiropractors for insurance fraud. Turns out, they were sovereign citizen types who insisted on representing themselves. At one point, a defendant got up to the lectern and started lecturing the federal judge that because there was fringe on the flag in the courtroom, the court was an admiralty court lacking jurisdiction over him. Bizarre. Later pled out and all are serving time. I'm a lawyer. The highlights reel. I wasn't drunk. I was stumbling because I was shot in the Cuba Revolution 10 years ago. This didn't match up because we weren't 10-year post-Cuban Revolution. Also, being shot doesn't make you smell of cheap beer. I didn't know H was a controlled substance, so having H wasn't a crime. I'm an addict, so it's okay. I had coke. I need it as a medication. My designated driver got drunk, so I had to drive drunk. Being prescribed medication and going to a therapist for a diagnosed sex addiction doesn't make you a sex addict. Because I'm Irish, there's a presumption I'm drunk. To an Irish American, police officer and judge, marijuana will be legal soon, so you can't charge me now. I didn't personally sign the Constitution, so it doesn't apply to me. And my favorite, if I'm arrested I'll be violated on probation, so you can't charge me with a crime. Not you can't as in please don't, but actually it would be illegal to do so. I am a lawyer. The state tried to argue that probable cause exists simply because there is a police report alleging the crime. From the fact that a police officer filed this report, it is a reasonable inference that the crime took place as described. Good, allegations are self-proving now. Well, wrap up court then. I guess no need to hear any more motions to dismiss ever. I wonder why no other prosecutor in 240 years of jurisprudence ever thought of that before. 25-year-old assistant district attorney who went to the worst law school in this state. A taxi driver was charged with assault for pelting stone at a bus driver after a minor accident between both vehicles. Defense lawyer: Your lordship, the bus driver was injured on right side of his neck. It is not possible for my client to cause that injury. The bus is right-hand drive and the door on left side of the bus was open and driver was in driver's seat. State: Your lordship, is counsel unaware that buses have windows? Defense: The window was closed. Judge: Really? How many times in this very hot and humid Indian city have you seen a bus drive around with windows closed unless it was raining? Defense: I request adjournment, your lordship. Not a lawyer, but I thought this was a very strange defense. Gary Heidnik had a history of mental illness, but nonetheless made a fortune in the stock market and had enough to retire indefinitely. In the late 80s, he decided to kidnap 5 women and chained them to the wall in the basement where he arped them every day, as well as tortured them. He was fond of electrocuting them for not getting pregnant. When one of the women starved to death, he forced the other women to eat her body mixed with dog food. Another woman, when getting her routine electrocution torture, was accidentally electrocuted to death. One of the remaining 3 victims asked if she could visit family if she promised to come back. He agreed and she called the police. In court, he claimed that he had committed no crime because the women were already chained in the basement when he moved in. There's a case clock made in the 18th century that has been in my family for over 100 years. The firstborn child normally inherits the clock. That is, until my grandparents had my uncle. My uncle has been a frick up since he was a teenager and always has relied on his parents to help him out, no matter his age. When he was in his late 20s, he flew to Taiwan and spent all of his money on stupid crap and needed to have my grandmother wire him money for a plane ticket. All the time that he couldn't pay his mortgage on a house that he could never afford, and also quit his job expecting my grandmother to pay for it. She gave him $20K in agreement that if he didn't repay her then he give up his right to inherit the clock. Over the years he seemed to forget that the clock would never be his and had a friend appraise the clock with the appraisal calling it Uncle's name, Clock. Uncle never repaid the money he borrowed. He peed my grandmother off enough for her to write him out of the will for tangible personal property, aka items the clock. He takes the executor of the estate, my dad, to court for the clock. My dad just has his attorney represent him. Uncle wants to be allowed in the courtroom with his attorney, but my dad's attorney says, no, that's not fair since my dad isn't there. Judge agrees but uncle pouts about it and accepts. The trial lasts no longer than 10 minutes. The will is evidence saying that uncle has no claim to the clock. Uncle's attorney submits the appraisal but my dad's attorney gets it thrown out because it's not proof of ownership and it was written by my uncle and his friend. Attorneys and judge agree that he has no claim to the clock. My uncle is allowed in but wants to go on the record even though the case is settled. My dad's attorney rolls her eyes but agrees. He states that they were in court because he was supposed to inherit the clock but did not. Dad's attorney states that he has no legal claim to it. Uncle's words were, well, I suppose it was always just matter of ethics than legality. My dad's attorney, baffled, states, then what are we doing in court? Homeboy got clock blocked. My dad told me a story in which his opponent claimed that the Surgeon General's 1964 warning was never released in the New York Times. He did this through use of a book and he claimed the headline was not in there and did not exist. My father spent the entirety of the next night looking for the book, found it, bought it, found the headline for which he was looking, and absolutely demolished the argument the next day by showing the headline to everyone. Currently studying law. One of my tutors told me about a case he had while working for the state, where the defendant tried to claim that being an orphan had given him severe PTSD and mental illness and he was unfit to stand trial. Unfortunately, he was on trial for murdering his parents, so it didn't really fly. Not a lawyer but was the child in a custody case between my parents. My mother's lawyer argued for and had put in the final agreement that I had to add my mother as a Facebook friend. You have been visited by the doggo of exquisite pizza taste. Good memes and tasty streets will come to you but only if you comment eat tasty. Papa, if you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check out another video. Or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.